podium or something.
Okay.
Well, you have to hold both
Peter
mics.
Boyce has been a member of the Greenwich Tea Party since we began meeting early in the beginning of this year. When I have questions regarding the Constitution, he's the one I turn to. He is the Constitutional Convention Chairman in New Jersey. He's an inventor. He's the Constitutional Seminar Instructor. He's the proprietor of Delmont Sawmill in South Jersey for 29 years and the Constitutional Party congressional candidate in 2010 in District 2, just to name a few. He's going to come up and give us a brief overview of a couple of things that we really need to know about. So if you would like to welcome Mr. Peter Boyce.
Thank you.
This won't get in your way, will it?
No, I'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay, as Brenda said, thank you, Brenda, for 15 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it. I'm going to go through this quickly, so be prepared. I'm going to talk about two very important issues. She mentioned I'm the CON-CON chairman, and that's not to promote a CON-CON, that's to stop a CON-CON and to rescind New Jersey's standing CON-CON call, and I'll explain to you what a CON-CON is and how dangerous it is. And the other issue I'm going to be speaking about is a bill on the Senate calendar, Bill S-510, the Food Modernization and Safety Act, which is going to be turning over control of our food supply to the federal government, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and the United Nations. Fortunately, I don't have too much time to speak about that, so I'm not going to scare you too bad. Okay, first we're going to speak about the Constitutional Convention. Now, Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of both a Senate and a House of Representatives. Now, let me ask you a question. Anybody who knows algebra, if all the legislative power is with the Congress, then how much is with the President and the Supreme Court?
1/3.
Zero. Zero. They have no power to legislate through Supreme Court rulings of the law of the case, not the law of the land. And the President has got no business legislating through executive orders and signing statements. Anyway, let's move along. How long is the term for a Congress? How long? Just lost it. How long is the term for a congressman?
2 years.
2 years, correct. Where? Sorry. That's okay. I'll yell. This mic goes directly into the camera, so. Okay, there we go. Where does it say in the Constitution that congressmen have to face their voters every 2 years? Article 1, Section 2, the very next item. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. The reason for this is Founding Fathers debated this long and hard. And because the House of Representatives has legislative power and they most directly represent the people in their districts, they had to face their voters every 2 years. How do these types then keep getting reelected? Get elected and elected and elected. How is this possible? Is because the voters keep electing them. Why? Why do people continue to reelect representatives who vote for the expansion of government through unconstitutional social programs, socialism? Because they are the ones receiving the benefits of those socialist programs at the expense of the people, us, Congress. Many career politicians in Congress count on the socialist giveaways, the earmarks, bringing home the bacon to their district. They count on that to buy their re-election. So if the voters in those districts addicted to social services won't or can't vote the socialist career politicians out, what other recourse is available to the American people?
Amendment.
Oh, someone said term limits. Glad you said that, because that's going to be the venue of how I explain a constitutional convention. Term limits, gee, that sounds good. But according to Article 1, Section 1, there's nothing about limiting the terms. 2 years, but nothing about limiting terms. So it requires a change of the Constitution. Now, there are only two ways to change the Constitution. And that's addressed in Article 5 of the Constitution. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. So, that's the one way. But, as a practical thing, what career politician is going to vote to boot himself out of office? I mean, it's a nice, cushiony job. He'd have to go out and get real work. That's not going to happen. So that's wishful thinking. The only other way to change the Constitution, let's go back to Article 5, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures or by convention by 3/4 thereof. So what they're saying is, the other way is if 34 state legislatures vote to call for a constitutional convention to propose amendments, whether it's congressional term limits or whether it's a balanced budget amendment or whatever, when 34 states have standing calls, then the United States Constitution will go into convention. There's only been one constitutional convention in the history of America. It was in, you have a glass of water or something? It was in 1787 when the Articles of Confederation went into convention to be amended. But the delegates to a convention have total latitude. They have complete authority and power to do as they please, to make the changes they please. And what they pleased to do in 1787 was to scrap the Articles of Confederation and draft an entirely new document. By the grace of God, these were God-fearing men who had just fought off the British to win our independence at great personal sacrifice. They gave us our present Constitution. Excuse me. But if that were to happen today, it would be a major media, special interest, multinational corporation, socialist, shark-feeding frenzy on our Bill of Rights. Don't take my word for it. Here's James Madison, the father of the Constitution. In 1788, Virginia and New York petitioned Congress for a constitutional convention, and this was his response to them. If a general, these are his words, the father of the Constitution, if a general convention were to take place for the avowed and sole purpose of revising the Constitution, it would naturally consider itself as having a greater latitude than the Congress, total authority. It would consequently give greater agitation to the public mind. An election into it would be courted by the most violent partisans on both sides, and would no doubt contain individuals of insidious views who, under the mask of seeking alterations popular in some parts, might have the dangerous opportunity of sapping the very foundations of the fabric, shredding the Constitution. Having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, which assembled under every propitious circumstance, I should tremble for the result of a second meeting in the present temper in America. That was 1788. He could not imagine what it would be like over 230 years later. Don't take his word for it. Here's Chief Justice Warren Burger now, 200 years later. Chief Justice Warren Burger of the Supreme Court. His response to Phyllis Schlafly, the founder of Eagle Forum, who wrote to him, quote, I have also repeatedly given my opinion that there is no effective way to limit or muzzle the actions of a constitutional convention. The convention could make its own rules and set its own agenda. Congress might try to limit the convention to one amendment, say term limits. Congress might try to limit the convention to one amendment or to one issue, but there is no way to assure that the convention would obey. After a convention is convened, it will be too late to stop the convention if we don't like its agenda. The meeting in 1787 ignored the limit placed by the Confederation Congress for the sole and express purpose. With George Washington as chairman, they were able to deliberate in total secrecy with no press coverage and no leaks. A constitutional convention today would be a free-for-all for special interest groups, television coverage, and press speculation. Our 1787 Constitution was referred to by several of its authors as a miracle. Whatever gain might be hoped for from a new constitutional convention could not be worth the risks involved. A new convention could plunge our nation into constitutional confusion and confrontation at every turn, with no assurance that focus would be on the subjects needing attention. I have discouraged the idea of a constitutional convention, and I am glad to see states rescinding their previous resolutions requesting the convention. In these bicentennial years, we should be celebrating its long life, not challenging its very existence. Whatever may need repair in our Constitution can be dealt with by specific amendments. Chief Justice Warren Burger. Don't even take their word for it. Here's the deans of law schools of major universities. Supreme Court Justice Arthur Goldberg, Harvard, Notre Dame, Stanford, University of Texas, Southern Methodist, Maryland, Utah, President of Brigham Young University, and the American Legion condemning Constitutional Convention. What is the third solution? There are two ways to change the Constitution. Neither of them will work. They're not going to vote themselves out. And if we push the term limits, we're going to end up scrapping the Constitution. We're going to be handing them our surrender slip. So what's the third alternative? And it means work. Educate our fellow Americans about the founding principles embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Secondly, organize them to campaign for the election of constitutionalists in Congress. I might add, those constitutionalists, when elected in sufficient number, can begin repealing unconstitutional legislation and vote for our withdrawal from NAFTA, CAFTA, GATT, World Trade Organization, and others. Thank you. Ron Paul introduced legislation to get us out of NAFTA. And other international trade agreements that are destroying American industry, economy, businesses. They can't make it with all thousands of pages of regulations. Don't spell free trade. It's called highly regulated trade, and it's killing our businesses. Okay. Move on. Without constitutional liberties restored, prosperity will return. Those young and able-bodied now dependent on social services will no longer be out of jobs, but find their services greatly needed in a fresh and booming economy. They will then join us and vote out the socialist politicians themselves. That's the solution. I might say, one more voice in the past, Thomas Jefferson. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. That's what we're doing. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. The Tea Party can champion the cause of getting New Jersey's standing con call rescinded through educational programs for the public. That's exactly what we're doing. I might add, the major media portrays the Constitution Party, the Tea Party, Campaign for Liberty, the 912ers, Liberty and Prosperity in Landing County. Oh, we're a right-wing radicals, extreme right. I've been to the Democrat functions. I've been to the Republican Country Club functions. You never hear the Constitution mentioned at the Democrat functions. You occasionally hear it mentioned, but never discussed in any depth at the Republican functions. But yet, these groups I just mentioned, Tea Party, talk about the Constitution continuously and how to get government to obey it. Well, if we talk about the Constitution, think about it. That's the document that both the left and the right in Congress swear to. Does that put us on the extreme right? No, that puts us exactly in the center. Exactly in the center is where we are politically. That's what the country needs to get back to. The Food Modernization and Safety Act. I've got 2 minutes to scare the hell out of you. Okay. I might add, to sum up on CONCON, and Frank will be on, but my opponent was an assemblyman. He sat at my table for 20 minutes as I went over quotations of constitutional scholars. He nodded his head, he understood, and he voted for it anyway. And it still stands, New Jersey has a standing CONCON call that needs to be rescinded. We need your help to get that thing rescinded.